So, I talked about shadow work recently and how it's pivotal for inner healing. Shadow work must happen for us to release the difficult emotions that spawn dysfunctional behavior patterns that keep us in a state of high emotional alert and relationship drama. The shadow work is what we need to do to create an entirely new way of living that anchors us in a state of well-being. And one of the letters that I received recently regarding this was from Claire in the UK. And I quote, "I'm in the process of really digging into my shadow, and I find cannabis essential in this work. I find that it means that you can go deeper and still maintain a strength or anchor in the sense of not feeling afraid to go there. It's hard to articulate," she says, but she goes on, "It's like the emotions don't take over when using cannabis, they just flow. And that's a huge step for me, having dealt with quite crippling anxiety and depression." And she goes on to say, it's a tough process whatever you do. And I do worry I depend on cannabis too much. I prefer to use both CBD and THC daily, but at the same time, and it really helps. I appreciate you sharing with us because I felt so guilty using cannabis for years and years, but you've really helped me to own it and feel good about my choices. Well, I really love hearing from you about your experiences regarding your exploration with cannabis as an agent of emotions and trauma release. And Claire here brings up a very important point. You know, she said it's like the emotions don't take over when using cannabis, they just flow. And she added that that's a huge step for me, having dealt with quite crippling anxiety and depression. And you know, there's this word, re-traumatization, that has to do with trauma. And re-traumatization occurs when a person re-experiences a previously traumatic event. Now, trauma is painful. And until we release it, we carry it with us. And depending on your background, you know, either a little trauma or a lot of trauma. And the release needs to be achieved without activating a shutdown response that's often triggered by reminders of the trauma-inducing episode. You know, I remember back in the day in talk therapy bringing up a traumatic memory which triggered the pain of reliving it. And, you know, the emotional pain flooded over my body. It was excruciating, this re-traumatization. And, you know, people can get very wary about this happening and try to keep any shadow work that could do this at arm's length. But as Claire points out, cannabis can ease us into creating the self-regulation that we need to reconnect to the body and regain a sense of control within, which is how I started working with cannabis many years ago. You know, the plant doesn't do this as effectively by itself. The most efficient and effective means I and countless others have found to strengthen our inner constitution involves active, expressive meditation and breath work techniques. And when we do add the judicious use of cannabis, it strengthens our resilience to do the work of releasing and avoiding re-traumatization. You know, once you start getting the upper hand and begin facing these emotions, it's awesome. It feels so good because your outer life starts reorganizing as well. The underlying guiding principle here is that in order to regain access to memories and responses that have been frozen in the body by trauma, you know, frozen in the tissues of the body, we need to expand our control over the stress response to the trauma. And cannabis can be very effective in supporting that. That was a lot. You follow me? You know, Claire added in her correspondence that there's a lot of misinformation about cannabis. And she says, I find I get judged harshly being a daily smoker based on people's preconceived ideas. And she adds, I find it's often people who have never even tried the plant themselves. But she sums it all up by saying, I know it's a special plant, and I look forward to a time when we can all understand it better and it can help all our lives. Ooh, elegantly said, Claire. I personally believe this plant is here for our well-being. Whatever you're trying to heal, and we are just nibbling at the edges when it comes to its capacity for emotional healing, which is why I use it so effectively in my emotional liberation work. What are your thoughts on this? Are you wrestling with trauma and difficult emotions? How have you found relief? Drop down to the comments section and weigh in, okay? I'm Becca Williams, and I want you to lead your most magnificent life, and I want to help you do that.